Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be a mid-year book freakout tag. This is the very first time that I'm doing this, so I'm really excited to show you guys what I've been reading lately and what I've been thinking about my book so far. I'm not in my usual spot again because I'm visiting my brother, and his girlfriend kindly let me use her bookshelf to film my video in front of today. But let's get into the tag because I'm so excited to do this. The first question is the best book you've read so far, and I have two books that I would consider the best books that I've read so far. The first one is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. They Both Die at the End is about two boys who are given a call at the beginning of the day saying that they're going to die within the next 24 hours, and they don't really have anyone to spend their last day with, so they log on to this app called The Last Friend and they meet each other on there, and then they end up spending the rest of the day together. And it's a really beautiful story about friendship and love and making the most out of your life. This one really surprised me. I didn't expect it to be so good. I kind of just impulsively checked this one out from the library, and then when I read it, I was really impressed by this one. So far that one's the best novel. And then I also have a children's book in here, which is why I considered two books for this category. But the second one is Eyes That Kiss in the Corners by Joanna Ho. Eyes That Kiss in the Corners is about a young girl who notices that her eyes are a little bit different than her classmates, but she also notices that her eyes are the same as her mother's, her grandmother's, and her sister's. And it's kind of about her learning to accept her heritage and the way that she looks. This one was just instant tears for me, and it also covered a lot of topics that I feel like a lot of children would struggle with, especially with physical appearance, where you kind of like just look different from other kids. So I think that this book is very important for that. And also the illustrations were really pretty, and I just feel like every child should read this book. The second is the best sequel you've read so far, and for me that was Breaking Dawn. Breaking Dawn, as most people know, is one of the sequels to Twilight. It's the last book in the Twilight saga, and this one is about Edward and Bella getting married and doing a bunch of other stuff, and I won't spoil it for anyone. But it's a really nice ending to the whole series despite kind of the mediocrity of the rest of the series. I'm kind of like not sure if I should consider this a sequel. I guess it's the sequel to the sequel to the sequel. The sequel to the sequel to the sequel. But out of all the Twilight sequels, I would consider this one the best out of all of them, and I feel like that is kind of self-explanatory. This was the very first time that I've read Breaking Dawn, and I filmed a video on that, so if you want to check that out, please go check that out. Third question is new release that you haven't read yet but want to, and for me that is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I'm not really sure what this book is about, but from what I understand, it's set in like the dark academia setting, which I really love. I read The Silent Patient earlier this year, and I really love that book, so I would really love to check out The Maidens. It's one of the very few new releases that I'm really excited for, and I've already bought it too, so I'm really excited to read that one. Next is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and for me, I didn't really know what to consider for this one because I'm not keeping up with new releases, but I did look up some new releases for the rest of this year when I looked at this tag, and what stuck out to me was Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe. Lore Olympus is based off the Greek story of the taking of Persephone, but the way that the myth goes is Persephone is the goddess of spring and Hades is the god of death and hell or something. And one day when Hades is on Earth, he sees Persephone and he falls instantly in love with her and wants to take her back to the underworld. That's just like the general myth of it, but the story is about them falling in love basically. And there's a nice twist in the story where all the gods are kind of set in like a modern day setting, even though the earth is like set like during like the Greek times. So it's a story that I really love and have been keeping up with for the longest time, and I'm really excited to have this story in book form. Next is the biggest disappointment, and for me that was The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. The Turn of the Screw is basically about a governess who goes to Bly Manor to take care of two young children, and just some weird stuff happens. It's just like a haunting story, and honestly I can't tell you much more than that because the story just dragged on and I could not get myself to pick up this book. I kind of expected this to be good because they based that one Netflix series, The Haunting of Bly Manor, on this book, and it was really short, so I was expecting it to have a lot of action in it, but it kind of just fell flat for me. and it really dragged on even though it was such a short book. So off camera, I unhauled that one right away and I did not want to even look at it ever again. And that one's probably the lowest that I've ever rated a book. Next is the biggest surprise, and for me that was Educated by Tara Westover. Educated is a memoir about the author. The author grew up in a survivalist family where they would always be preparing for the end of days, and her father really distrusted the government and anything that had to do with the government. She and some of her siblings were never given birth certificates, so to the government they didn't really exist. They never went to school. They also avoided going to the hospital, so as you can imagine there were a lot of injuries that happened that were not treated very well. But after one of her brothers goes to college, despite what her family has taught all of them, she ends up being inspired to go to college herself and ends up getting a really great higher education. So it's basically a story about how family can kind of hold you back from these things in a very, very harmful way. Whenever this book first came out, I would always pass it up in the bookstore and kind of would just ignore it because the book cover really didn't appeal to me. And even though I read the synopsis of it, it did sound crazy to me, but it wasn't crazy enough for me to try and read it on my own. But then one of my good friends, Teresa, recommended this to me, and she even let me borrow her book to read it. It ended up being one of my favorite books of this year so far, so I'm really happy that I read it. I really resonated with it, and it hit a lot of personal points for me. And what I mean by that is that I really related to her on a very personal level. And it also came during a time when I was kind of struggling in school, so reading about her struggles in school also like kind of just made me get through the quarter a lot better. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend this book. Next is my favorite new author, and for me that was Angie Thomas. The Hate U Give was one of the first novels that I read this year. That novel was very eye-opening to me, and it told the Black experience in a way that I could personally understand. As someone who is not a part of this community, I really loved reading about it. The family was so well written that I felt like I understood exactly what was happening. And most importantly, the way that she showed the message in this book was not like in your face. I don't know how to say this, but like it's just not like outright said. So I used to be a filmmaker, and one thing that has always stuck with me as far as filmmaking goes was to always show and not tell, because it makes things a lot more interesting in that way. And I feel like even though it's a book and obviously like you're basically telling a story through writing, I think Angie Thomas does a really good job of showing rather than telling, so to speak. I'm just really excited to read more of her stories. I've already bought Concrete Rose, so I'm excited to read that one, and then eventually I'll get to one of her other books. I think it's about a girl who wants to be like a rapper or something. But yeah, I'm just really excited to read more of Angie Thomas's novels. Next we have the newest fictional crush, and honestly I don't normally get fictional crushes. I mean, I did when I was like a teenager, but now that I'm an adult, I don't really get fictional crushes. But I will say that Luke from The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is really attractive to me. Like, just like his aesthetic and stuff is really attractive to me. I don't know, like just his vibe, I guess. That is like the worst explanation of why I think Luke is attractive, but I don't know. I just think he is. Out of all the books that I've read so far this year, I guess he's the most attractive to me. And then on a similar note, my newest favorite character is Addie LaRue. Personally, I really relate to Addie LaRue. She has this fear of living her life the same way as everybody else, and I also have that fear. But then also she's cursed to never make a mark on the world, which is another fear that I have. So I feel like Addie LaRue is just like a manifestation of me in some ways. And then also she's French, also she's immortal, like all the things that I really love in a character. And then also she figures out a way to work around things, which is definitely a skill that I would love to develop. Next we have a book that made you cry. And there's a couple, but the first one that I think of is Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. Like I said before, instant tears. I also cried during They Both Die at the End. Another book that I cried during was The Hate U Give. And honestly, I don't cry during books normally, so that's why I'm kind of like listing all of them. But those are the ones that I could think of right off the top of my head. But in case I forgot any of the books, I would go check out my Goodreads, because I do have a list on there that lists all of the books that I cried during. Next is a book that made you happy, and for me, that was Twilight. Twilight. Even though I haven't read the rest of the Twilight series, I did read Twilight before, and when I read it again, I just felt so much nostalgia, and it made me so happy to read something that I've read before and something that reminded me of when I was in high school and just like crushing on Edward. This also came during a time when I was kind of just like not having a good week mentally, so reading this book again just really lifted my spirits, and it'll probably be something that I'm going to continue to read every year. Even if I don't read the entire series, I'm probably going to read Twilight every year. Next we have the most beautiful book you've bought so far or received, and for me that was Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi. This book is a sequel to Children of Blood and Bone, and this is going to be a trilogy, I believe, or I don't know. I know that there's going to be a new book that's coming out soon, so this isn't the last book, but it's the last one that's out so far. This series is set in a fictional country called Orisha, where there is a group of people called the Magi who are being oppressed for being able to practice magic. In the first book, the magic was taken away from them after many of the Magi were killed, and the first book is basically about them trying to bring back magic. And since I'm not at home, I can't show you the book physically because it's at home, but as you can see from the picture that I'm showing here, that it's a very, very beautiful cover. Probably my most favorite cover out of all of the books that I own, at least out of the ones that have faces on them. Next we have what books do you need to read by the end of the year, and there's a bunch that I would like to read by the end of the year, and I'll just list them out for you instead of explaining what each of them is about. First is Becoming by Michelle Obama. Obviously I'd like to read that one because I really look up to Michelle Obama, would like to learn about another woman of color. Just would really like to learn about her life. Next we have Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. Like I said, I really want to read this book. I already own it, so I should be getting to it soon. And then I've also already mentioned The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I also want to read the Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've already read The Hobbit this year, and it was another unexpected book that I really enjoyed, and I know that the Lord of the Rings trilogy is really popular, so I'm really excited to read that and also watch the movies because apparently a lot of people like the movies too. I also want to read the Six of Crows series as well as the Shadow and Bone series by Leigh Bardugo. They've already started that Netflix series Shadow and Bone, so I really want to know what it's about, and I know that a lot of people really enjoy these two series, especially Six of Crows, so I'm really excited to read those two, and I'm probably gonna film another like reading Shadow and Bone for the first time reading vlog, just like I did for the Twilight one, so really excited to get to that one. And then I've also never read the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series by Rick Riordan. I'm also probably gonna do another like reading vlog for this one, just like how I did for Twilight, because that one I definitely have never read any of those books, so it'll be a completely new thing for me, and I feel like I'm just missing out on that book series. Finally, out of all the books that I want to get to this year is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. One of my reading goals this year was to read a book about the military, and I feel like this book would be perfect for that. For those of you who don't know me, I used to be in the Navy, so I feel like it's appropriate for me to read at least one book a year that has something to do with the military. But I've been finding that hard because sometimes military books are not something that I personally identify with, but David Goggins is a Black author. I would really love to learn about his experience. There's not that many Black Navy SEALs, if I'm going to be honest with you. I know a little bit about David Goggins, and his story is pretty crazy, so I'm really excited to read his book and find out more about his struggles and the things that he has overcome in his life. And then finally, favorite book to movie adaptation that you've seen this year. And to be quite honest, I've been reading a lot and doing schoolwork mostly and running this YouTube channel, so I haven't really had time to watch that many movies. But I will say I really love Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, or actually the one by Studio Ghibli Films, because the movie is based off of the book, but it doesn't stick exactly to the book, and I think it's just a given. It's just one of the best Studio Ghibli films out of all of them. Even though it doesn't really stick to the book, I really love that movie and it's basically what inspired me to read this book in the first place. I don't know if that counts, but I will say it's a really good movie if you haven't watched it. So yeah, that is it for my mid-year book freakout tag. I think that's what the tag is called. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up because that would really help me out so much. If you have any questions, suggestions, feedback, anything, you can leave a comment down below. Follow me on Instagram because I do post updates on there about what I'm reading and what I'm doing with my channel. And I also do a lot of polls on what you would like to watch next. So if you'd like to give any feedback on what you want to watch on my channel next, then please go check out my Instagram, DM me on there, or participate in the polls. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can be notified every time I upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!